Academic research has also shown that political messages tend not to change the minds of voters who have already chosen a candidate. They are most likely to persuade undecided voters. And in 2016, an uncommonly high percentage of voters liked neither candidate and stayed undecided longer than usual. By some counts, about 37 million Americans, 15% of the electorate, were still undecided in the final weeks before the election. Jameson argues that the impact of the Russian cyberwar was likely enhanced by its consistency with messaging from Trump's campaign, and by its strategic alignment with the campaign's geographic and demographic objectives. Had the Kremlin tried to push voters in a new direction, its effort might have failed. But, Jameson concluded, the Russian saboteurs nimbly amplified Trump's divisive rhetoric on immigrants, minorities, and Muslims, among other signature topics, and targeted constituencies that he needed to reach. She noted that Russian trolls had created social media posts clearly aimed at winning support for Trump from churchgoers and military families, key Republican voters who seemed likely to lack enthusiasm for a thrice-married nominee who had boasted of groping women, obtained multiple military deferments, Gold Star parents and a former prisoner of war, and described the threat of venereal disease as his personal equivalent of the Viet Cong. Russian trolls pretended to have the same religious convictions as targeted users, and often promoted biblical memes, including one that showed Clinton as Satan, with budding horns, arm wrestling with Jesus, alongside the message like, "If you want Jesus to win." One Instagram post portraying Clinton as uncaring about the 2012 tragedy in Benghazi depicted a young American widow resting her head on a flag-draped coffin. Another post displayed contrasting images of a thin homeless veteran and a heavy-set, swarthy man wearing an undocumented, unafraid, unapologetic t-shirt, and asked why this veteran gets nothing, and this illegal gets everything. It concluded, "Like and share if you think this is a disgrace." On election day, according to CNN exit polls, Trump, despite his political baggage, outperformed Clinton by 26 points among veterans. He also did better among evangelicals than both of the previous Republican nominees, Mitt Romney and John McCain. In her post-article, Jameson wrote that it was hard to know if Russian propaganda and dirty tricks, including the steady release of hacked emails, starting with Democratic National Committee correspondence that was leaked just before the party's convention, had made a decisive difference in 2016. Nevertheless, she argued, the wide distribution of the trolls' disinformation increases the likelihood that it changed the outcome. After the article's publication, she returned to her sabbatical project on the debates with a newly keen eye for Russian trolls and hackers. After reviewing the debate transcripts, scrutinizing press coverage, and eliminating other possibilities, Jameson concluded that there was only one credible explanation for the diminishing impression among debate viewers that Clinton was forthright. Just before the second debate, WikiLeaks had released a cache of emails, obtained by Russian hackers, that, it said, were taken from the Gmail account of Clinton's campaign chairman, John Podesta. They included excerpts from speeches that Clinton had given to banks, for high fees, and had refused to release during the campaign. The speeches could be used by detractors to show that, despite her liberal rhetoric, she was aligned with Wall Street. The hacked content permeated the discourse of the debates, informing both the moderator's questions and the candidates' answers. All this, Jameson writes, gave legitimacy to the idea that Clinton said one thing in public and another in private. During the second debate, on October 9, before 66.5 million viewers, one of the moderators, Martha Raddatz, relayed a question submitted by a voter. Did Clinton think that it was acceptable for a politician to be two-faced? The question referred to a leaked passage from one of Clinton's previously unreleased paid speeches. Russian hackers had given the passage to WikiLeaks, which posted it 2 days before the debate. In the speech, Clinton had cited Steven Spielberg's film, Lincoln, as an example of how politicians sometimes need to adopt different public and private negotiating stances. The point was scarcely novel, but the debate question, which took her words out of context, omitted her reference to the movie, and didn't mention that Russian operatives had obtained the speech illegally, made Clinton sound like a sneaky hypocrite. When Clinton cited Lincoln in order to defend the statement, Trump pounced. She got caught in a total lie. Trump said. Her papers went out to all her friends at the banks, Goldman Sachs and everybody else. And she said things, WikiLeaks, that just came out. And she lied. Now she's blaming the lie on the late, great Abraham Lincoln. Quote, the dynamic recurred in the third debate on October 19, which 71.6 million people watched. When Trump accused Clinton of favoring open borders, she denied it, but the moderator, Chris Wallace, challenged her by citing a snippet from a speech that she had given, in 2013, to a Brazilian bank. My dream is a hemispheric common market with open trade and open borders. Again, there was no mention of the fact that the speech had been stolen by a hostile foreign power. Wallace said that the quotation had come from WikiLeaks. The clear implication of Wallace's question was that Clinton had been hiding her true beliefs, and Trump said to him, "Thank you." His supporters in the audience laughed. Clinton said that the phrase had been taken out of context. Should been referring not to immigrants but to an open-bordered electric grid with Latin America. She tried to draw attention to Russia's role in hacking the speech, but Trump mocked her for accusing Putin, and joked that was a great pivot off the fact that she wants open borders. He then warned the audience that, if Clinton were elected, Syrians and other immigrants would pour into our country. The fact-checking organization PolitiFact later concluded that Trump had incorrectly characterized Clinton's speech, but the damage had been done. Jameson's research indicated that viewers who watched the second and third debates subsequently saw Clinton as less forthright, and Trump as more forthright. Among people who did not watch the debates, Clinton's reputation was not damaged in this way. During the weeks that the debates took place, the moderators and the media became consumed by an anti-Clinton narrative driven by Russian hackers. In Cyberwar, Jameson writes, the stolen goods lent credibility to those moderator queries. As Jameson reviewed the record further, she concluded that the Russian hackers had also been alarmingly successful in reframing the American political narrative in the crucial period leading up to the second debate. On Friday, October 7, 2 days before it took place, 3 major stories landed in rapid succession. At 12:40 p.m., the Obama administration released a stunning statement by the Department of Homeland Security and the Director of National Intelligence, accusing the Russian government of interfering in the election through hacking. This seemed certain to dominate the weekend news, but at 4:03 p.m. the Washington Post published a report by David Fahrenthold on an Access Hollywood tape that captured Trump on a hot mic boasting about grabbing women by the pussy. Then, less than half an hour later, WikiLeaks released its first ranch of emails that Russian hackers had stolen from Podasta's account. The tranche contained some 2,000 messages, along with excerpts from the paid speeches that Clinton had tried to conceal, including those that would be mentioned in the subsequent debates. Julian Assange, the head of WikiLeaks, has denied working with the Russian government, but he manifestly despises Clinton, and, in a leaked Twitter direct message, he said that in the 2016 election, it would be much better for Gog to win. If the WikiLeaks release was a Russian-backed effort to rescue Trump's candidacy by generating a scandal to counterbalance the Access Hollywood tape and the intelligence report on Russian interference, Jameson writes, it worked splendidly. The intelligence community's report faded from the headlines. That Sunday morning, none of its authors were invited on any major talk show. Instead, the programs breathlessly discussed the pussy tape and the Clinton campaign's emails, which were portrayed as more or less exposing both candidates as liars. Jameson notes, instead of asking how we could know that the Russians were behind the hacking, the October 9th Sunday show moderators asked what effect the disclosures would have on the candidates' respective campaigns and what the tape and speech segments revealed about the private versus public selves of the contenders. If not for WikiLeaks, she writes, the media discourse in those crucial days likely would have remained locked on two topics advantageous to Clinton: Russian election subversion and Trump's treatment of women. Jameson also argues that, in most hotly contested elections, the candidates blunt each other's messages, which results in fairly balanced media coverage. In 2016, she believes Russia's involvement upset this equilibrium. She asks readers to imagine how different the 2016 election might have been if Trump's campaign had also been hacked, disgorging the emails of Paul Manafort, Michael Cohen, Michael Flynn, Jared Kushner, and Donald Trump Jr. Among other things, this would have exposed correspondence about the notorious June 2016 Trump Tower meeting with a Russian lawyer, and Trump's payoffs to a pornographic actress and to a Playboy model. Documents that Trump has kept concealed, such as his tax returns, also might have come to light. Instead, Jameson writes, throughout the autumn of 2016 a steady stream of content stolen from the Clinton campaign, which the press generally described as coming from WikiLeaks, rather than from Russia, reweighted the news environment in Trump's favor. As Jameson dug further into Russia's discourse saboteurs, she decided that she had the makings of a book. Most discussions about the 2016 election results, she believed, had been misguidedly framed around the question of whether the Russians had changed votes directly. There wasn't evidence for this. Instead, she suspected, the Russians had influenced who voted, or didn't vote, and that could have changed the outcome. She set aside her debates project and continued sleuthing. She amassed more evidence this past February, when the Justice Department, in connection with the Mueller probe, released a detailed indictment of 13 Russians working at the Internet Research Agency, a troll farm in St. Petersburg. The operatives were described as having worked day and night waging information warfare against the United States of America. Then, in July, Mueller indicted 12 Russian intelligence officers for hacking into the computers of the Democratic National Committee and the Clinton campaign. The indictment maintained that the Russian government had executed a sprawling and sustained cyber attack on at least 300 people connected to the Democratic Party and the Clinton campaign, infiltrating the computers and implanting malware that, in some instances, enabled spies to covertly monitor the keystrokes. As the Times reported, the Russians had leaked stolen files in stages, a tactic that wreaked havoc on the Democratic Party throughout much of the election season. Strikingly, the July indictment showed that Russian hackers' first attempt to infiltrate the computer servers in Clinton's personal offices had taken place on July 27, 2016. The same day that Trump had declared, "Russia, if you're listening, I hope you're able to find the 30,000 emails that we're missing," adding, "I think you will probably be rewarded mightily by our press." Another revelation from the indictment which jumped out at Jameson was that the Russian hackers had stolen the Clinton campaign's data analytics and voter turnout models. A month later, when we met in Philadelphia, Jameson said, "So we're starting to close in on a pretty strong inference that they had everything needed to target the messaging at key constituencies that did effectively mobilize in this election." Cocking an eyebrow, she added, "The possibility that has happened starts to become a probability, starts to become a likelihood, pretty quickly." Joel Benenson, the Clinton pollster, was stunned when he learned, from the July indictment, that the Russians had stolen his campaign's internal modeling. "I saw it and said, holy shit," he told me. Among the proprietary information that the Russian hackers could have obtained, he said, was campaign data showing that, late in the summer of 2016, in battleground states such as Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, an unusually high proportion of residents whose demographic and voting profiles identified them as likely Democrats were Hillary defectors. People so unhappy with Clinton that they were considering voting for a third-party candidate. The Clinton campaign had a plan for winning back these voters. Benenson explained that any Clinton opponent who stole this data would surely have realized that the best way to counter the plan would